See, record.
Hey, record button.
Can you, it says recording.
Yeah, I see it.
You hear it? Okay. Look, everybody, this is David P. France. I'm coming to you from Basel, Switzerland. I'm talking to Danni Gee, okay? And just to give you a little background on Danni, Danni has over 35 years of experience in the arts and entertainment industry, both on stage and behind the scenes. Her professional performing career began as a dancer with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. Well, before that, let's just say that you were with the Philadanco company. Is it also known as Philadelphia Dance Company?
Yes, Philadelphia Dance Company.
The first was Philadelphia Dance Company, and she was there for several seasons, and then she joined the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, and remained there as a principal dancer for about 7 years.
6 and change. More or less.
More or less. Well, I'm going to allow you to elaborate on that, but I also want to point out to everybody that Danni, right after that period, she discovered that she had vocal ability, and then I would say she was plucked, or she was picked as a background vocalist, and then going on to provide this service for Sister Sledge, Gloria Gaynor and Cher. She also formed her own band called Suga Bush. Is this band you still have this band? Is it more or less?
Still sort of, around, not performing as much as I would like to, but we did do a show in October, so we're sort of,
That counts.
We're still around-ish.
Still around-ish. And currently, she is a curator for the New York CityParks SummerStage, and you've been there for 14 years.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
welcome,
Danni. Welcome.
Thank you.
Kind of how this came about. I have experience in TV production many, many years ago, and I felt there was a need to actually connect with people who were out there, or I saw that were out there doing things in the community. And I first noticed Danni on social media as the curator for SummerStage, and she was booking all kinds of fantastic dance companies. So that was what, that is what drove me to sort of like watch you as you were posting and reporting and so on. Tell everybody how you got started. We talked about this briefly in terms of your high school experience or your education early into the dance world.
Sure. So I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Southwest Philly represents. And I was, going to a typical public elementary school through, up into the 5th grade. And back to your point about my singing, I was actually already singing in a church choir when I was little, thanks to my stepfather at the time. And so I don't know how much actual singing it was because I was little. And so it was probably more hollering and screaming than anything. But yeah, my sister at that time she's 2 years older than me, and she was in a middle school, junior high school. And so at that time, in the neighborhood that the school was in, it was a very poor, predominantly white neighborhood. And so the school that my sister was going to, they were busing in, little Black kids into that neighborhood to go to that particular school. And so, they were being harassed and targeted by the teens in that neighborhood. And my mother was starting to notice that my sister was becoming, increasingly agitated. She was skipping school. My mother was finding out that she was cutting school and all these things. And both of us, were really good students, pretty good kids, And so my sister told my mom what was going on with the school and the neighborhood bullies and the fear that she was experiencing on the daily. And that's when my mother just figured I need to find another school for them immediately, because I would be graduating from my elementary school and following suit behind my sister. And my grandmother actually found an article in the newspaper, an ad for a performing arts school in Center City, Philadelphia. And so my mother checked it out, and in the 6th grade, I started school at Performing Arts School down on 313 South Broad Street. And that's when I was formally exposed to the arts.
Mm-hmm.
My mother did her best to provide that sort of experience for us. She took us to see The Wiz, Timbuktu, weekends, sitting with her, watching old classic movies and Gene Kelly, all of it. So she was heavily into that too, which just wasn't something she could actualize in her own growing up in her youth and her family with their lack of means. But once she sent us to this performing arts school, it was maybe 100 kids total in attendance. It was a private, smaller school that was attached to what is now the University of the Arts. And, it was always very physical, always, running and playing and jumping and skateboarding and whatever. So dance for me was that natural outlet. Once I started at this school, I just was naturally drawn to it. Although we also were given singing lessons, acting lessons, but the dancing, it was immediate for my tastes and my desires and something inside.
And this was a brand new school at that time?
No, it had been in existence for a while. I'm not sure exactly when it opened, but at that point, there had been kids there that had started there, in their third, fourth year and were now seniors at that school. So they've been around for a little while.
Okay.
And so, and I started in the school. So by that following semester in 7th grade, I declared myself a dance major and started, really like buckling down, getting serious. This is what I want to do. This is amazing. I was starting to get little recognition pretty quickly into my studies. And that led to Philadanco because one of my classmates, although she was 2 years older, but we all were in the same dance classes, Evelyn Watkins, she was already a dancer with Philadanco. And I at that point had not heard of Philadanco, unfortunately. And so she encouraged me to come and audition for Philadanco's summer training program, which was a free program to students that could take classes all summer long at no cost with some of the most amazing legendary teachers, in the field. And I went and I auditioned, whatever that day was, 1983, and was accepted by the legendary Joan Myers Brown
Wow.
into the training program. And then on and on with taking classes, being invited to take the company class, as she kept her eye on me, and then eventually being asked to join the company.
So as someone who was a young girl from Philadelphia, I mean, you talked a little bit about, the exposure there. Can you give us a little insight on sort of, let's say, the difference between the high school experience and then as you were pulled into Philadanco? Could you give us a little
Sure.
That?
Yeah, my school was predominantly white. I mean, but these were artist kids. There was whatever my sister was experiencing in her junior high school with all of that taunting from the neighborhood, that was not present in my high school. So I can honestly say that, we were just all these nerdy high school musical kids, and but predominantly white. And so even in my dance classes, I tended to be the only Black girl in my classes. And so when I went to Philadanco and saw this room full of beautiful Black kids, boys and girls, scrambling to get a place in this school, and then Joan Myers Brown, oh my. I mean, my mother, she was pretty classy and well-dressed and mannered and all of that. And then in walks Joan Myers Brown, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's more of us out here. Like even in my neighborhood, my sister and I used to get teased for the way that we spoke, because my mother was not having all of that. She wasn't having that. And so we would get teased. And so to be in an atmosphere where there was that mix of, earthy, funky, yet classy and elegant and well-spoken and dedicated and focused, it was amazing. And Joan Myers Brown is such the, she's the example of that.
Yeah.
You know, she came in, she was no nonsense. And then to also stick around and see the company members, I would like hang out after my class and just watch them come in, just poise, all shades and shapes and manner of hairdo. And
Right.
I was in love. That's where I wanted to be, and that's where I needed to be.
And how long were you with the Philadanco again? It was what?
So I started there in the training program in '83.
83.
She invited me to join the company about a year and a half, 2 years later, '85. And I was there until 1991 when I auditioned for the third time for Alvin Ailey.
Right. And tell us what that was like. I mean, because as I recall back then, there was a big dance scene. I mean, I wouldn't say much bigger than it is today. That's not the right description. But it seemed to be bigger and had more influence. Now we have internet and computer and all these other forms of communication. But back then, I mean, particularly Ailey DPH or Dance Theater Harlem seemed to have a big
I mean, I feel like, you know, I mean, I haven't been that entrenched in the dance world now even though I'm presenting dance now, but sort of on the ground with it. But back then, I just recall so many of the companies connecting. I feel like they probably still do now, even the newer companies, but you know, knowing the dancers from Dayton Contemporary, knowing the dancers from, you know, Lula Washington, knowing the dancer, you know what I mean? So even though we didn't have the internet, you know, we had, thanks to Joan Myers Brown, the Black Dance Conference, and now it's called the International Association of Blacks in Dance, but where we will all come together and break bread, commune, complain, just everything. But and even in the dance scene in Philadelphia, you know, with Rennie Harris on the come up and, you know, Elion dance. So they're still around. And so we're still here. You know, even with all the newer companies, there are so many of us that are still here and rocking it and trying to make it happen.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit earlier about how your audition process was for Ailey. You mentioned it again here. You said for the third time. So like, take us into that world and take us into that moment, those moments.
Yeah.
You were trying to get into the company and what was going through your mind.
Well, you know, once I started with Philadanco, Ailey became a much more present ideal in my mind. Because at that time, you know, I mean, it's kind of still are, but, you know, they're like sister companies, you know, and for a while, Philadanco had been that pipeline to Alvin Ailey, just a little bit. I mean, quite a few over the years, decades, Philadanco dancers have, you know, migrated up to the ranks of Alvin Ailey. And sometimes it reverse, not often, but the reverse sometimes can happen. Maybe not with the main company, but Ailey 2 dancers have come down to Philadanco, come south. And, but the first time I auditioned, I was just, you know, everyone was doing it and I was young, but I definitely wasn't ready. I would think I was maybe 17 and just, you know, just not ready mentally for all of that. And he wasn't even looking my way anyhow. I mean, and it was just very intimidating to be in New York City. Like, it was my first New York City audition. And it was just too intimidating, you know. I should have just faded off in the corner somewhere and was probably cut in the first big round of cuts. The second time, they were just doing a national search. It was more, I think, for PR. I don't think they were really looking for anyone that year. And so by that point, I sort of let the dream go, even though I was, you know, happily dancing with Philadanco. But, you know, I did know that I wanted to see more of the world and all these other things. And at that time, Philadanco was only touring nationally. And even coming from my high school experience, learning about arts and cultures and societies all over the globe, that just really piqued my interest. You know, ancient Greek history and Egyptology and all these things that even in my house, my mother studied this stuff. So I really wanted to see all of these things. And if I could do that dancing, even better. And so by my third audition, I felt more ready. By that point, you know, I had met a gentleman who, you know, supported my efforts to get into the company, not financially or anything, but just mentally. He was a self-made businessman out of New York, had seen me dance with the company at the Joyce, and stayed in touch with me and was like, you know, what would you like to do? What would you like to achieve? And I said, well, I would like to eventually get into Alvin Ailey if that's even possible. And so he worked on me for a year. And so that third audition, I went up May 23rd, 1991. I'll never forget it. No, I'm sorry, May 24th. Oh, I almost forgot it. May 24th. And I went up to New York, May 23rd, the night before. So it was went to New York really late. And May 24th was the day of the audition. And an acquaintance, I won't go so far as to say a friend, in Philadanco, who shall remain nameless. Girl, I see you, girl. She shall remain nameless. You know, the Ailey School had moved by that point. The last time I had gone to the Ailey School was, they were at 1515 Minskoff still, at Broadway, at the Minskoff building. And they had moved to the West 61st Street building by that point. And I had no idea where it was. So I had asked this young lady who I knew had been up there recently taking class, dancing, what have you. And she was like, oh, you're going to the Ailey audition? And I was like, yeah, trying to be all, you know, girl, you know. Right. And she said to me, I don't think they're looking for tall girls because April Berry had just left the company. She's like, you know, so I don't think you have a chance, basically. And I'm just like, okay, but I'm still going. And then I asked for the address, you know, thinking, you know, we're cool, we're dancing, you know, together, whatever. So I jump up the next morning and I actually overslept because I was exhausted coming in the night before and not getting to my hotel room until like 2 a.m. And I overslept. Right. And I jumped in a cab and I raced to the address that this person had given me. And lo and behold, it was the wrong address. So, you know, running around the block and freaking out, thinking I was going to miss the audition. And by some miracle, circling the block one more time, I finally see this white and blue cloth banner thing reminiscent of the Wade in the Water.
Right, sure.
Right?
Right.
And I'm looking at it, I'm like, is that it? Is that it? And I run down the hill, run up the stairs. I didn't even have time to put my contact lenses in. I mean, I've been wearing glasses since first grade, so.
Wow.
And, you know, so I couldn't really see, and I'm at the bar all frazzled, no ballet slippers, you know, just take a spot. And Chaya, Masasumi Chaya, was giving the audition. I was number 76. And
he retired as associate director, right? Or
exactly. And I didn't realize that the year that I joined the company was the same year that Chaya was promoted to associate artistic director. Right. At that time, he was just rehearsal master. Which was, you know, great. So he's giving the audition, and I think because in the back of my head, I had this thought that they were only looking for tall girls, and I'm just basically a little bit over 5'4". You know, that sort of relaxed me, even though I was so nervous just to be in that energy in the room with all these other women.
Sure.
And so I went through the audition just saying, I'm here, I want her to see me. I was messing up, I was falling out of turns. But I was having a good time. I'm laughing in the middle of the audition, and I don't have a quiet laugh, but I mean, I wasn't being obnoxious, but like laughing with everybody else. And it didn't dawn on me that I potentially was maybe about to get the gig when she made a whole bunch of other cuts, and now it's down to 4 people in the room.
Right.
And it still hadn't hit me that maybe I'm going to get this. And now we're down to 4 girls. And that's when I started to get like really nervous.
Right. So at that moment when there were 4 girls, do you recall doing anything differently that you had done beforehand? Or it was the same?
Up to that point?
Did you do anything differently at that moment where you realized that this was serious? It was getting serious in your mind, or at least in, you know, in terms of your
Yeah. I mean, I probably actually no. I don't
No,
know.
you just say, okay, it's 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, my how I was behaving in the audition. I mean, I was being professional,
Sure.
you know, like I was doing the best that I could, you know,
Right.
but because I still wanted Miss Jamison to maybe consider me for down the road potentially.
Right. I understand. Yes.
You know, so I was still giving it my all,
Right.
you know, but I was allowing myself not to freak out if, in fact, I fell out of a turn or, you know, collapsed a little bit out of a penché.
Right.
You know, but I had the benefit potentially of not being overwhelmed with nerves because of this idea in my head about the height thing. So,
right.
And then by the time it got down to us 4 girls, women, we were so exhausted because by that point it was 2 hours and change in.
Right.
And they gave us some really easy choreography, and it was wade in the water.
Okay.
And we had to mock holding an umbrella, the umbrella woman. And, you know, I'm standing next to this one woman from Philadelphia who I knew personally, and beautiful dancer, 6 feet tall. And I'm like, why am I standing next to her? You know, and then she made the next round of cuts, and it was just me and this other woman. And that was it. You know, she told us to sit down, and she's conversing with the people up in the panel. There were like 7 to 8 people in front of the room watching us, including Sylvia Waters, you know, the late amazing Denise Jefferson, Dolores Brown, Milton Myers, you know, probably some high-level person, probably the executive director from Ailey was in the room.
All teachers and professors there at the Ailey School. Right?
Exactly. And then, Judy just said, you know, hey, I can't make a decision right now. I'll call you in the morning. And yeah.
And then it was.
And then it was.
Well, look, I want to hit on a couple other things to give us an idea of what it was like to perform with the Ailey Company. I mean,
that was amazing.
For people who are out there, young dancers, people who have no idea of what that's like, can you give us a little insight?
It's amazing. It's an amazing gig. I mean, I can honestly say, like, those 6 years there, you know, for me, seeing the world as, you know, a young woman from Southwest Philadelphia, even though we travel a bit, my mother would take us on vacations, God bless her, to the islands and things like that. But, you know, seeing the world for me, I mean, I have wanderlust. So dancing was just, you know, cherry on, you know, on top of an amazing travel cake, the globe cake. So the dancing part was easy for me. You know, it's just like, this is my job. And they take really good care of you. We were spoiled. I mean, getting the per diem, the union rules, you know, the break every hour, 5 minute, all of those things that protect us as dancers, and that level of professional company. That was amazing. And the camaraderie I felt at that time. When I joined the company, I joined with Troy Powell.
Right.
Oh my God. And Michael Leon Thomas.
Troy is now, he's leading one of the companies, right?
He's the artistic director of Ailey too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And the other person, the next person you mentioned, who is that?
Michael Thomas. He danced prior to that with Dayton Contemporary. He danced also with the Jamison Project.
Right.
When she formed that in Philadelphia for those 2 years.
I remember.
Yeah. And Troy is a true Ailey story. Like, Troy came up through the school, the summer program. I think he had scholarship, I'm not sure. Came up through Ailey 2, joined Ailey 1. Right. Went back to Ailey. So he's a true Ailey.
Sure, he knows it.
Story. And the other person that came in at that point was returning to the company, which was Leonard Meek. Beautiful chocolate brother, bald head. I think he danced right before he came back to Ailey with Lar Lubavitch. I think he was out with Lar and gorgeous. So it was the three guys and me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was the only woman hired that year, which I was very proud of. But yeah, it was great. I mean, we danced on some of the best stages, best production crew.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the hotels were normally amazing. We went to, like, you know, in Europe, sometimes it could be a little hit or miss.
Right.
But
Sure.
with the skinny beds, no tubs, but whatever. I mean, whatever. You're on the road and you're seeing cities and somebody else is paying for it. Like, what is there to complain about?
Right.
You know?
Right. What's the your favorite city or your favorite time in outside of the United States? Do you remember?
That's a rough one. That's a really tough one. However, I will say my first trip was to Athens.
Okay.
Like right out the gate. You're going to Greece.
Wow.
I didn't have a passport. You know, the manager of the company at the time, the company manager, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
The second phone call after I got the call from Ms. Jamison
Mm-hmm.
was the company manager, and she instructed me. She was like, "Stay by the phone because the company manager is going to call you next."
Okay.
Let's get right to business.
Right.
Let's be clear, Ailey is a business, and that's cool. I'm down with the business side. Let's be straight. Let's be tight.
Right.
And yeah, so he called me, and the first thing he asked me was, "Do you have a passport?" And I said no. And he was like, "Okay, young lady, that's the first thing you're going to have to get. And I want to see a copy of it as soon as you get it." And so, yeah, like I had to do the expediting and all of it because for Greece, like my first rehearsal date was July 22nd, and I will be leaving for Greece September 2nd. So that's a quick window.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a quick window. Wow. 6 weeks, a 6-week rehearsal period. And I learned maybe, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 ballets in that time. Yeah, so I mean, come on.
Well, were you doing it like how many, 8 hours a day? How many hours a day? Like a normal?
When we're in rehearsal season in New York, the day starts most of us would take class at 10, somebody's class in the building. Right. A lot of us would take either Finest Young or ballet, Miss Forsyth, Horton, so we had access to all the classes in the building, which was awesome. And rehearsal itself would start at 12. It would go from 12 to 3, lunch from 3 to 4, and then another 3 hours, 4 to 7 on top of that. Mm-hmm. And, depending on what the rehearsal schedule was, if you weren't in everything, then you could leave, but most of the time you were either understudying something, so you're there all day.
Right.
You're there all day. So.
Well, there's so much more that I want to talk to you about that. Maybe at some other point we get to
part
go
2
into detail, but I want to make sure that I bring this point in because after your 6 or so years with Ailey, you then became a background vocalist for a number of different artist bands. So give me a taste of what that was like, or the process of going from Ailey dancer to background dancer to some of these people.
Yeah, well, there's definitely an in-between transition of, like, what the hell am I going to do? Because as you know, we've talked about, I left Ailey prematurely in my mind because of an injury. I certainly didn't want to leave when I left. I was just hitting, I thought, my stride, and I was peaking. I was doing Cry and all these things.
Right.
But so I left the company and floundered for a bit, not knowing what to do. And I eventually got into fitness training and teaching. And prior to me joining Ailey, I had been doing some background dancing for Kathy Sledge, the baby sister of Sister Sledge, who has the voice. Right. And she found me. She came to watch a dance class that I was taking in Philly, Roni Koresh jazz class. And she was looking for dancers for her solo gigs by herself, doing her dance hits and all of that, club hits. And so once I returned to Philly post Ailey and started teaching, she and I ended up teaching in the same facility. And she, at that point, had also veered into fitness and was teaching spin classes, and she loved spin. And so we ended up at the same facility in Chestnut Hill, Philadelphia, Germantown. And she saw my name on the roster and tracked me down, called me up and said, hey, you're back? Like in that gap of 6 years, like we hadn't been in contact. And I said, sure, yeah. And remarkably, she said, well, I'd love for you to come work with me again if you're able. And, you know, for that level of dancing, it was fine. And I just couldn't do my 6 o'clocks and wasn't doing that anyway. It was a lot of, you know, hip ball, kickball change, and it's fine. But started working on some music for myself, and she heard me backstage singing one day and, you know, asked me, do you sing? I didn't know you could sing. And I said, no, I'm working on some things. I don't know. And, you know, music was that way to just write out my pain and angst over not dancing. And so she invited me to come sing with her and her sisters. Sure. She was, by that point, she had reunited with her sisters, but not all 4 of them were ever available at the same time to do a show. And so I would be that 3rd or 4th harmony for the group. And that went on for the next like 6, 7, 8 years. And during that time, I met Gloria Gaynor, Miss Disco Queen, I Will Survive, and started singing with her as well. And just started my band and just walked into this brand new world of musicians and singers and downtown folks, and you know, it was incredible. It was incredible.
Yeah. It must have, I mean, you give me the impression that it was a somewhat of a surprise, or something like, okay, I'm going to just sing, and there was no, I mean, was there any recognition by your, you know, of your ability? It was as if you was like, oh, you want me to sing? Okay, let's do it. Was it that?
Oh, I knew I had a decent voice. You know, even in high school. I mean, I was singing in high school and leads in high school plays.
Oh, okay.
You know, I sang at my sister's graduation and wrote our high school song at that point. And I you know, so I was singing.
So you were already in the mix in some respect.
Sure.
Like you didn't necessarily just make a full.
Yeah, and even
with nothing
right,
behind you, right?
Right, and even when I was in Ailey, there were several of us in the company that were testing our vocal talents. Desmond Richardson, I mean, no, seriously, if we were in like a big, say, opera house type theater, there was always a piano somewhere,
right?
And we would sneak off, you know, after rehearsal or, you know, before we, you know, started. QB Burke, the late QB Burke, was another one, a gorgeous voice. Don Bellamy. You know, Raquel Chavis. I mean, like, so many singer-dancers in the mix that Antonio Carlos Scott, who is actually on his Facebook page, is daily posting videos of him singing from his house in Florida. It's amazing. Right. You know, so there were quite a few of us that had these multiple talents going on, you know. And it also helped us on the road, like people like Aubrey Lynch and Tracy Inman, the current director of the school, knitting these fabulous creations, Renee Robinson. So all of us had these other things, not just dance. It was amazing. Sure. And so transitioning into music wasn't that far-fetched. Right, you know, it was just building up my confidence in my voice, because even in my family, like my sister has an amazing voice. And so I just looked at her as sort of like, you know, the singer. I'm over here the dancer.
Right,
and that's okay.
I understand.
And so dipping my toes into the music scene. And, you know, I have the voice that I have. It's very much a rock and roll voice. I don't do a lot of runs and melismas and all that stuff. I'm a storyteller.
Okay. Well, I want to, before I let you go, because I think we're running short on time, I wanted to briefly touch on your current role as curator for New York City SummerStage, because that's how I saw you. That's how I found you. And at the time, I was envisioning. I think I wanted to do what you were already doing. Right. So I was like, okay, I know all these artists. How am I going to get them in one place?
Yeah. Right.
How am I going to get them in one? Because if I can, you know, then this is a big. And I think I saw one of your your productions in Brooklyn. That was with Cecilia and Martha, right?
Yes.
We talked about that. So briefly go into that, and then we'll save the details for another time in the future once, you know, we get this thing moving and we have more interviews under our belt. Yes, of course.
Yeah, right. If that ever comes out.
Yes.
But yeah, so again, trusting in the universe, being open to saying yes to things, I think has done well for me. And just taking a chance, even when I'm terrified. And so delving into the music scene of New York, I moved back to New York when I started my band and fitness and all of this, you know, and this new cast of characters down the road is what landed me SummerStage. So when I first moved back to New York and started singing, carrying on, I met the poet, Jessica Care Moore. Sure. And in her circle of friends, you know, with Greg Tate, Sharif Simmons, all these people, I met this wonderful gentleman named Freedom Bradley. Yes. And he was an actor, was an actor. And we dated for a hot minute, but, you know, we're just all in that mix, figuring it all out, you know. And Freedom then went on to become the theater director at SummerStage, director of theater programming.
Right, I understand.
And so we're still friendly and all of this. And in 2006, I get a phone call from him saying to me, "What are you up to?" I just come off a tour. I was looking for work. And he said that SummerStage was looking for a dance programmer. And, you know, just a random call.
Right.
And I said, and he was like, "Danny, you've got to interview for this." And I had never done any behind the scenes work on that level. And I was like, okay. And I went in, and here I am 14 years later. This amazing woman, Alexa Birdsong, took a chance on me to be this person. And it, you know, it's had its ups. The worst part of my job is having to say no to artists and companies.
Sure.
The second worst part of my job, obviously, is when you do all this work to put it all together, and there's a rain out or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
This right here that we're in now.
Yes. Yeah, it's a mess, right?
It's cataclysmic.
It's a mess. Well,
yeah.
What were you saying?
We're still trying to hold out hope. My executive director made a statement yesterday to New York One or someone that is out there now publicly that we're holding out hope to be able to do something. You know? And I'm like, the city needs it, you know, depending on obviously what the mayor and the governor says, and also how people feel. And I love the work that I do. I love bringing arts to the stage, I mean, for free, and introducing people that have never seen dance for the first, you know, coming to the park and saying, "Oh, dance is for me. Why have I not gone to dance all these years thinking that it wasn't for me?" Like I wouldn't understand it. It's beautiful. It's fun. It's sexy. It makes me cry. It makes me laugh. It makes me think. And dance is all of those things.
Right.
And so
I agree with you. In terms of curating, I still think there's so much that can be done.
Absolutely.
Right? There's so much that, and you and I both know that, you know, what's being presented isn't necessarily the full picture, right? So, you know, getting the funding and then getting, you know, that funding aspect is really important. You know, so what you're doing is important. And I wanted to make sure that I interviewed you. You're the first of these interviews. I think what you're doing is very, very important.
Thank you.
Particularly in these times that we are in. I'm gonna close the interview right now, and hopefully we get to talk to you again some point in the future once we get a couple of more interviews under our belt, get this thing moving. I think, you know, people like yourself, I think people want to hear from people like yourself and those that have experience. You're one of a kind. You know, in terms of the arts, everyone I believe is one of a kind, but to hear people's stories is really important. So I want to thank you.
Thank you
for taking the time, and I wish you a good rest of the day or the evening.
Thank you. Thank you as well. Well, it's evening. You're already at evening, right?
That's right. It's still light here. but it's going on like what, 15 minutes to 7 o'clock.
Yeah. So yeah, well, thank you for this, and stay safe. I don't know how it is in your part of the world, but I know obviously New York has been hit extremely hard, and so just trying to stay thankful and grateful and safe and just prayerful that we come out of this in some way. I know it's going to be devastating for a lot of people, but I still have hope in the human spirit, and that we come out of this better somehow.
Yeah.
And evolve somehow.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And,
thank you.
We will talk soon, right?
See you on social. All right. Take care, David.
Take care of yourself.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.